In the spring of 1986, something strange began happening on showroom floors across America. Salesmen who once fought over fresh inventory suddenly avoided one particular car. Managers quietly told their teams to steer customers elsewhere. Service bays filled up faster than the lot outside. And in some dealerships, brand new cars, untouched, unsold, sat in the back, keys locked in drawers, as if they were radioactive. Customers didn't know it yet. But inside the industry, whispers had already started. There was an engine that nobody wanted to talk about, and it was about to cost one of the most powerful car companies in the world billions of dollars, and something far more valuable than money: reputation. To understand how an engine could make dealerships stop selling new cars, you have to go back to a time when American automakers were desperate. The 1970s had humiliated Detroit. Gas lines, oil embargoes, Japanese imports flooding in with cars that started every morning and didn't drink fuel like a V8 with a grudge. Names like Toyota and Honda stopped sounding foreign and started sounding reliable. By the early 1980s, the pressure was suffocating. The biggest automaker in the world, General Motors, needed redemption. They needed efficiency. They needed innovation. And above all, they needed to prove that American engineering could evolve. So they doubled down on diesel. Diesel engines promised everything Detroit was craving: better fuel economy, longer life, torque that made highway cruising effortless. Europe loved diesel. Truckers swore by it. And in an era obsessed with miles per gallon, diesel felt like the future. But there was a problem. Building a diesel engine isn't as simple as tweaking a gasoline motor. And in a corporate boardroom obsessed with cutting costs, someone made a decision that would echo through thousands of service departments. Instead of designing a diesel engine from scratch, engineers were ordered to convert an existing gasoline V8 platform into a diesel. On paper, it saved millions. In reality, it planted the seeds of disaster. The engine would be known as the 5.7-liter Oldsmobile diesel V8. And when it launched in 1978, it wasn't just an option, it was a promise. Installed across multiple brands under the GM umbrella, Oldsmobile, Cadillac, Buick, even Chevrolet, it represented Detroit's comeback. Dealers were thrilled at first. Here was a full-size American sedan that could approach 30 miles per gallon on the highway. In the late 70s, that was borderline revolutionary. Customers who once feared fuel prices suddenly had an alternative that didn't look like a compact import. Sales surged. In some markets, diesel-equipped models made up nearly half of Oldsmobile's production. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. Very wrong. The early warning signs were subtle. Hard starts, rough idling, a little extra smoke. Mechanics chalked it up to unfamiliarity. Diesel was new territory for many American service technicians. Then engines started failing. Head gaskets blew, bolts stretched, fuel systems contaminated. Owners complained that their cars stalled in traffic or refused to start in winter. Tow trucks became regular visitors to suburban driveways. And then came the lawsuits. One dealership owner in the Midwest later described it as watching a slow-motion train wreck. Cars returned again and again. Customers demanded refunds. Word spread faster than corporate memos. In towns across America, the same scene played out. A customer walks into a dealership furious. A car with barely 20,000 miles sits dead in the service bay. The engine, marketed as durable, efficient, advanced, has failed catastrophically. The service manager doesn't know what to say, because he's seen this before. Internally, engineers had begun raising alarms. The converted gasoline block wasn't strong enough for the high compression forces of diesel combustion. Head bolts failed under stress. Cooling systems struggled. And water contamination in diesel fuel, something European systems were designed to handle, proved devastating to the American design. But by the time the scale of the issue became undeniable, hundreds of thousands of engines were already on the road. And dealerships were drowning. Warranty claims exploded. Repair bays overflowed. Parts shortages became routine. Some service departments reportedly replaced multiple engines in a single day. Imagine being a dealer. You've invested millions into your franchise. Your lot is full of shiny new cars wearing your brand's badge. And now customers are walking in asking one question: does this one have the diesel? If the answer was yes, some simply walked out. Salespeople began quietly steering buyers toward gasoline models. In some cases, Managers instructed staff not to recommend diesel under any circumstances. It wasn't an official policy, but everyone understood. Selling another diesel meant another potential disaster. And another angry customer. The financial damage mounted quickly. Warranty costs reportedly climbed into the hundreds of millions. Class action lawsuits piled up. GM faced accusations of knowingly selling defective engines. Consumer trust eroded. But the deeper damage was psychological. For decades, American automakers had battled for supremacy on horsepower and chrome. Now they were fighting for credibility. And they were losing. News outlets began covering the failures. Stories of stranded families and repeat breakdowns made headlines. Late-night comedians joked about American diesel cars that couldn't survive a road trip. In Europe, diesel meant endurance. Cars that could rack up 300,000 miles without complaint. In America, diesel began to mean something else entirely. Risk. Inside GM, tension escalated. Executives faced mounting pressure from shareholders. Engineers worked frantically on revisions, stronger bolts, improved fuel systems, better gaskets. But perception is harder to fix than hardware. Even when later versions improved, the stigma stuck. By the early 1980s, diesel sales collapsed. What had once been a cornerstone of GM's fuel economy strategy became a liability. Dealerships that once proudly advertised diesel options now avoided the word entirely. Some stopped ordering diesel models altogether. And here's the part that changed everything. In certain regions, dealers began refusing to stock new diesel-equipped cars. Think about that. A franchise dealer declining inventory from the largest automaker in the world. Not because of pricing, not because of demand, but because they feared the engine inside. It was unheard of. For an automaker that prided itself on scale and dominance, this was humiliation. Eventually, production was phased out. The Oldsmobile Diesel V8 limped through revisions before being discontinued. GM's broader passenger car diesel ambitions quietly faded. But the damage lingered far beyond the final production run. For years, American consumers avoided diesel passenger cars. Even when European manufacturers like Volkswagen introduced more refined diesel models decades later, many buyers remembered. Or at least they'd heard the stories. It wasn't until the 2000s that diesel regained some traction in the US market. And even that would later be overshadowed by another scandal involving emissions and deception. But that's another story. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, the fallout was immediate and brutal. Oldsmobile, once a proud and innovative brand under GM's umbrella, never fully recovered its prestige. Trust once broken is rarely restored. Sales fluctuated, brand identity blurred, and by 2004, Oldsmobile itself was discontinued, a slow decline that some insiders trace back to the diesel disaster as the beginning of the end. Was the engine solely responsible? No, but it became symbolic. Symbolic of rushed development, of cost-cutting over engineering integrity, of corporate decisions made far from the service bay. There's an irony here. The diesel engine was supposed to save GM. Instead, it forced dealerships into survival mode. Service departments became war zones. Sales teams lost confidence. Customers lost faith. And the American diesel dream stalled on the shoulder of the highway. Yet, here's what makes this story even more unsettling. The engineers who worked on the project weren't villains. Many knew the risks. Many pushed for stronger designs. But in massive corporations, compromises happen. Deadlines loom. Budgets tighten. Market share becomes the ultimate metric. And sometimes, an engine becomes a casualty of ambition. Or perhaps something else. Because when you look deeper, the question lingers. Was this simply a case of engineering miscalculation? Or was it a corporate gamble, knowingly taken, under the assumption that warranty cost would be cheaper than redesign? Internal documents from lawsuits suggested executives were aware of durability concerns before full-scale production. Whether those concerns were underestimated or ignored remains debated. But the customers who paid the price didn't care about boardroom nuance. They cared about cars that wouldn't start. They cared about being stranded. They cared about the feeling that something new and promising had betrayed them. By the mid-1980s, the American diesel passenger car market had shrunk to a fraction of its former promise. Imports dominated fuel economy conversations. Detroit shifted focus back to gasoline innovation and, eventually, performance once again. Muscle cars would return. Trucks would grow larger. NASCAR roared on Sunday afternoons. And diesel? Diesel became a punchline. It's hard to overstate how deeply this single engine reshaped perception. An entire fuel type became suspect because of one high-profile failure. Dealerships, once eager to showcase innovation, became cautious gatekeepers. The fallout rippled through corporate strategy for decades. Even today, mention Oldsmobile diesel in certain circles, and you'll see a knowing smile or a grimace. But here's the final twist. In Europe, diesel engines continued to thrive for decades. Reliable, efficient, long-lasting, which means the concept wasn't flawed. The execution was. So what really happened inside those conference rooms in Detroit? Was it overconfidence? Panic? Financial pressure after years of declining market share? Or simply a belief that customers would forgive early failures in exchange for innovation? We may never know the full truth. What we do know is this. There was once an engine that made dealerships hesitate to sell their own new cars. An engine that turned service departments into battlegrounds. An engine that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And perhaps something even more expensive. Trust. And somewhere, in the archives of corporate America, there are memos and meeting notes that tell a more complete story. A story of ambition colliding with reality. A story of a gamble that backfired. And a reminder that in the automotive world, power isn't just measured in horsepower. Sometimes, it's measured in consequences.